Hello, my name is Steve Miller. I am the CTO of Predatar, and I'd like to thank you for joining this webinar today. I hope that you'll find some of it useful. And today we're going to talk about the software, IBM software lifecycle for Spectrum Protect, or for TSM version 7. What does this lifecycle mean for customers who may still be using that version? And what can those customers do to facilitate a move away from that version to a current version of the software? And I think the first question to ask around that is, what is IBM's software lifecycle policy? Well, this is IBM's commitment to its customers to ensure clarity around how long software is going to be supported. If you look at the details of this policy, it says they will ensure that they support more versions of software than just the current version, so you don't have to upgrade to the new version as soon as it's released, and that their general intention is to offer around 5 years of standard support with an option to apply for extended support at a cost when the standard support expires. Now, the intention of this policy is to ensure that customers can plan in good time when they have to consider an upgrade of their software, and they know when they install software that support isn't just going to end at the moment when the latest version is released. So if we look specifically at that lifecycle page for Spectrum Protect or TSM version 7, you'll see that the general availability date was at the beginning. In fact, I think it was in January 2014. So as of now, IBM have been supporting this version of the software for around 7 years. By the end of this year, that means they'll have been supporting version 7 of Spectrum Protect for almost 8 years. And if you look at Spectrum Protect 8.1, the current version, this was first announced at the start of 2016. So you can see that IBM has actually been supporting both versions of this product now, Spectrum Protect 7 and Spectrum Protect 8, for 5 years. And by the end of this year, that'll be 6 years. So I'm sure you'll agree, that's an excellent period of support. So generally when IBM does announce an end of support date, they try to give customers around 12 months of notice. Again, they don't want customers to suddenly find that they've got to upgrade with very, very little notice. So this ensures that organisations have plenty of time to plan. So if we assume 12 months, then by the time that happens for version 7, there will have been around 6 years of parallel support for version 7 and version 8, and that's plenty of time, I think, for most organisations to plan that upgrade. But what does an end of support date actually mean? Well, if you've still got a version 7 environment beyond that date, the software will continue to work. Nobody's going to stop you using it, and if you really want to, IBM can give you a quote to extend the software support beyond that date. But the support from that point on effectively becomes on a best efforts basis. If there's a problem with the code, then IBM won't be spending time looking to fix that version 7 code. Their suggestion will be that you upgrade to a newer version, version 8, and they'll be able to look after you properly from there on. So if you leave your upgrade to that point, it might be complicated. Because one other thing to consider is the operating system that your Spectrum Protect server runs on. For instance, version 7 of Spectrum Protect server was able to run on Windows 2008 or AIX 6.1. So neither of those two operating systems today are supported by the relevant vendors. And if you're still running a Spectrum Protect server on one of those systems, you've probably got bigger problems than the lifecycle of your backup applications. You should be considering the possible security vulnerabilities that are presented by those down-level operating systems, and whether you can do an in-place operating system upgrade, or if it's time to shift to a more modern infrastructure with a current OS and then migrate your workload over. As well as being able to install the Spectrum Protect server on newer operating systems, if you want to back up more modern environments, you'd also have to be looking towards version 8 to meet those requirements. For example, if you want to back up SQL Server 2017, you'd need version 8 of Spectrum Protect for databases, and you'd need a recent version 8 client if you had plans to back up Windows Server 2019. But that's not all that Spectrum Protect 8.1 provides. As I said earlier, the first release of that version was in 2016, 5 years ago. And as of now, there have been 11 maintenance releases of this latest version, and several more interim releases, or fix packs. Each one of those maintenance releases have included new features, or enhancements to features that were already available. And if you move your environment from version 7, it will allow you to start taking advantage of those newer features. If you look at the release notes for Spectrum Protect 8.1, you can see details of the features that have become available with each iteration of the software. But I wanted to just quickly cover a few of those features here as part of this presentation. So early versions of 8.1, I think it was 8.11, introduced the possibility of converting tape data directly into a modern container deduplication pool. This allowed customers with legacy environments that were based around tape pools to realise the benefits of modern data deduplication pools without having to run both a tape pool and a deduplication container pool in parallel, which was how you'd have had to do that previously. So it reduces the need to have both tape-based storage and disk-based storage. Version 8.1.2 of Spectrum Protect Server introduced security enhancements based on TLS 1.2, making the backup environment more resilient from a security perspective, and include an automatic distribution of certificates between servers and clients. If you had bad experiences with SSL, and I know that some customers did, on earlier versions of Spectrum Protect, you'll be pleased to see how well it works from version 8.1.2 onwards. And this has continued to be developed over subsequent versions, with the latest version of the software, 8.1.11, providing support now for TLS 1.3. And there's been a gradual move towards greater use of cloud storage pools across the various version 8 releases. Earlier versions introduced basic support for providers like Azure and AWS, whilst later on came the flexibility to tier data to those destinations based on either the age or the state of the data, as well as support for Google Cloud Storage. 8.1.10 now gives customers the ability to run database backups to cloud storage, enabling those database backups to quickly be taken off premise, and removing the need to have lots of storage kept available purely to meet the need for database backups. Simply, there's lots of developments in version 8.1 allowing you to use cloud locations and to protect more modern workloads, but you can only take advantage of those enhancements if you move to Spectrum Protect version 8. So before we wind up today, we wanted to talk about a few of the possible scenarios that a move to Spectrum Protect version 8 could enable, and how flexible cloud support can help users to modernise their environment. Now, our first scenario shows possibly a traditional two-site installation. This will have backups stored at site 1 and then replicated to site 2, with backups to site 2 replicated back to site 1. Some of you might look at this and consider that it is a scenario that would have been possible with version 7 of Spectrum Protect, which is probably correct. But the advances in the Spectrum Protect deduplication pools and the replication enhancements in more recent versions mean that this is a more resilient scenario. Using version 8 than it would have been in version 7, you'll be able to replicate much greater quantities of data within your daily housekeeping window. And as mentioned in some of the earlier slides, from a security perspective, version 8 does offer enhancements over and above version 7. So an upgrade in this scenario offers more security for the data that you have in Spectrum Protect. Our second scenario builds on the first scenario, again we've got two locations, each one storing data and replicating it to the other site, and again each one benefiting from the enhanced data reduction techniques available in the modern storage pools. But this scenario also benefits from cloud tiering as well. Cloud tiering lets organisations set up pools in a public cloud. You can choose where that public cloud is hosted, and then tier data to that pool based on either age or state. This means that you can have a Spectrum Protect server on premise with a much smaller footprint than you would have otherwise needed, and then tier data as it ages off to the public cloud. From a cost perspective, this is a very appealing idea, and it gives you the opportunity to store much more data in your Spectrum Protect environment than would have been possible under that first scenario that we discussed. The latest versions of Spectrum Protect version 8 are compatible with a multitude of cloud storage providers. As I said earlier, Google Cloud has recently been added as an option. So if your organisation already has a preferred cloud provider, you might want to check the IBM compatibility matrix for the latest details. And then our third scenario to consider is slightly different. This scenario might explain a possible option for a single site installation that has traditionally created a second copy of their data by backing it up to tape and moving it by van to a secure off-site location. So again, the options here are possible because of more effective data reduction, faster replication, and greater support for public cloud providers. Instead of having a second installation on an alternate site, which may not be possible because you've only got one site, you could have a second installation in a public cloud connected to your own site using either a secure VPN tunnel or, for greater reliability, a direct cloud link. If you look on the IBM site, they've created blueprints that can guide the installation of a dedicated Spectrum Protect server in either AWS or Azure. It's possible to build your own server in IBM Cloud as well, or you could talk to a service provider such as Predatar, who already has cloud destinations that you could use. This can also be a cost-effective way of getting the ability of site-to-site replication for an organisation that might only have one physical site. And of course, by helping you to get your data into a public cloud, this means it might make future cloud plans simpler to get to because you can get to the data more easily. So to summarise before we move on to questions, Spectrum Protect, or TSM version 7, is now 7 years old. It's reaching the end of its software lifecycle. If you are still using this software, you should consider what this means for you and your organisation, what your requirements are for your backup environment, and how you can plan to take advantage of the features in the newer versions of the software. If you've got any questions about that at all, Predatar will be happy to help. Our contact details are shown on the screen at the minute. I am Steve at Predatar.com, and if you've got any questions, I think we're going to hand back to Rick and he will let us answer any questions in the session now. Thank you.